Really, when we're looking at the political context of everything today, the cost of living will be a very key issue. And I'm delighted now that Christopher Snowdon can join us on the programme. Chris, welcome to the programme. Today, the government will really need to address that issue if it's going to be within any sort of chance of winning the next election.
Well, it would be nice, but I mean, how can it? I mean, the plane has already crashed into the side of the mountain as far as inflation goes. We're already up at 7 or 8%, and even the Bank of England now accepts it will be up into double digits by the end of the year. The government doesn't control the price of products, doesn't control the price of food. We are the victim of policy decisions made in the past and also global problems. You know, the Shanghai lockdown, for example, the sanctions that we put on Belarus and Russia. You know, all of these things are having an impact, not just in the UK, but worldwide. So if you've got inflation at 10%, you know, the government can't wave a magic wand and give everybody 10% more income. And even if it did, you'd enter a price wage spiral. So the damage has been done. There are things governments can do to help, but really they needed to do them a long time ago, and there isn't enough time to do them now.
And I suppose today this will be about the long-term effects. There won't be anything immediate that will help people. What are some of the longer-term issues that the government could deal with if we're going to have a more prosperous economy looking into the future?
Well, they need to focus very heavily on growth. And of course, MPs always say that they are committed to growth, but every one of their actions tends to belie that. So we need to see energy security, for example. We need to see lower taxes in the kind of medium term and possibly to some extent in the short term. And we need to see deregulation. I was very pleased to see there's some talk of dropping GDPR and the accept cookies nonsense that we have to put up with online. That might seem a trivial issue, but actually a study came out this week showing that the economic effects of this pointless regulation of the internet are really actually quite significant. We've got the online safety bill coming up as well. Just stacks and stacks of regulations that we don't need and which hinder growth in all sorts of different ways. The government hasn't taken advantage of Brexit yet and the deregulation options that have come our way as a result of that. So there's lots of things that it can do. But as you say, these are more sort of medium to long term solutions. We do need to go for growth. If we'd have gone for growth more over the course of the last 20 years, everybody would have an extra have an extra 2,000 or 3,000 pounds in their pocket, and the rising price of gas wouldn't be such an issue. We've failed to do that, and I hope and I think that the cost of living crisis is a bit of a wake-up call to the government to stop focusing on trivia and to focus on making people more prosperous.
And I suppose when we need to focus less on trivia, there is a lot of trivia in Westminster. To some extent, Westminster runs on trivia. Do you have any hope, Christopher Snowdon, that today people will focus on the substance of what is announced in that Queen's speech versus all of the paraphernalia that surrounds it?
Well, of course, I hope so. I'm sure you will, Tom, and elements of the media will. A lot of the media are still, of course, obsessed with Partygate and Beergate. As the year goes on and things get worse and worse, and we're really, unfortunately, at the start of this inflationary problem, really, in terms of how much people really feel, the cost of living going up. The energy price cap has only just been lifted. We are in for a tough time. There's no two ways about that, and there's no easy solution to it. And there's not actually that much the government can do. There are things the Bank of England could do, but they're controversial in terms of whether we should be raising interest rates or not. We do have exceptions to low interest rates, and raising interest rates are the normal way of dealing with inflation, but it causes pain. This is the thing about inflation. By the time it's happened, you've already made the mistakes, and you're already faced with a difficult year or two. The important thing is to not allow this to spiral. And I suspect that means that the Bank of England will take the view, and maybe rightly so, that if we keep our fingers crossed for global events improving, then a lot of these prices are going to come down on their own. But people are going to have to accept that their real wages are going to go down. In other words, in terms of inflation, I don't think many people will be expecting a 10% pay rise, and so people are going to suffer. One thing the government could do, and perhaps it will even be in the Queen's speech, I doubt it, but it should be, is to uplift benefits by the rate of inflation. That's something that Margaret Thatcher introduced in the early 1980s. Benefits used to be tied to wages. She tied them to inflation, which I think is the right thing to do, because the government actually is counting on getting a lot more tax revenue over the next year or two than it has done in previous years, precisely because of inflation. Governments quite like inflation. That's the dirty secret. It helps them raise more money, for example, from VAT, from income tax, because you're keeping the income tax thresholds the same. People's wages are going up in nominal terms, but not in real terms, and the government's making a lot more tax revenue. Some of that tax revenue, I feel, could be used to uplift benefits in a Thatcherite way.